Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Knocked Conscious. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Lisa Ekman. She's the author of Deprogramming Democrats and unEducating the Elites, How I Escaped the Progressive Cult. I met her at Freedom Fest. She had a booth there. It was a great conversation. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it.
Sounds great. Well, Lisa Ekman, welcome to Knocked Conscious.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm gonna just have a quick opening, if I may. So,
Sure.
I had the honor and the privilege of having to do media coverage for Freedom Fest. So I was running around covering all lectures and panels, and there was this whole exhibit hall with a bunch of booths. Lisa was at booth, I don't remember the number, but I do remember it was an interesting book that I walked by called Deprogramming Democrats. And I myself have been deprogramming myself from the neocon side, not from the Democrat side. So it was beautiful when we walked by. You handed me your card. We're talking. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how you got to Freedom Fest, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, thanks again, Mark, for having me on to talk to you today. I was a Democratic advocate and lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for 20 years. I arrived there at the tail end of the Clinton administration, and I worked for a Clinton appointee at a federal agency. I was recruited through something called the Presidential Management Internship Program, which is designed to pull people with graduate level education into federal service. And I, over the next 20 years, I worked for a federal agency. I worked for 3 different senators in the United States Senate on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And just to give you a sense of the flavor, one of those was Ted Kennedy, one of those was Tom Harkin, and one was actually a Republican named Jim Jeffords, who switched parties to become an independent and gave control to the Democrats way back in 2001. So I spent
very quickly, you didn't go
Sure.
for a ride with Ted around any lake or anything, did you?
No, I was very careful not to do that. And actually, in one picture that I took with him, you couldn't see one of his hands, and my dad was like, "Hey, where's that hand?" And it was just in the small of my back. It was fine.
That's
He was
right.
actually,
Did you meet Robert? Did you meet Robert before or at Freedom Fest by any chance through this connection with Ted?
No, I have not. I have not met him. I saw him speak at Freedom Fest. I also saw him speak at the Libertarian National Convention, which I'll tell you a little bit about why I was there.
We are talking about that, and guess what? I've got a podcast coming up that I think you are going to love. We're going to talk offline.
Excellent. Yeah. So, I also worked during those 20 years. I went to law school and got my Juris Doctorate from Georgetown.
And I saw that Georgetown, very impressive.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, for what I was doing, it was the best place to go. I had a fabulous experience there, but I did. In retrospect, I look back, and one of the things that I talk about in the book was very evident at Georgetown, that your professors are going to be 90% Democrats, 90% liberals, and that's what you're going to be taught. So,
there's going to be an ideology push and just a lean.
There definitely is. There is indoctrination within the schools, and that is. I spent a lot of time thinking about that and writing about that in the book as I became awake to what's going on. So I also worked for federal contractors and also for nonprofits. So I kind of have the view of the entire spectrum of different types of organizations you can work for in Washington, D.C. I did disability policy advocacy. So I tried to make federal policy more supportive of people individuals with disabilities. And towards the end of my career, I was working as a lobbyist for a nonprofit association. I was elected by my colleagues to be chair of the board of a coalition of over 100 different national advocacy groups. And so I was really entrenched in democratic politics. I like to say, the way I look at it, I sort of made my way to the outside of the inner circles. I was never in the inner circles. So I would be at meetings with the Speaker Pelosi, for example, or fundraisers, but she didn't know my name unless her aide whispered in her ear who I was, and she didn't have my number on her, cell phone, that kind of a thing.
And
So
I think you would have had to been a certain level to do that too. You have to give up a certain bit of yourself to get deeper in,
you
right? I would assume.
you do, and there were certain things that I was not willing to do. And I
And
think
that's a beautiful thing. Just that you put I mean, just we had to give ourselves a little credit. We don't even realize sometimes where we take our liberty and say, for me, that's enough.
yeah, I think so, and
Because
I
you could
think
have probably gone further, right? I'm just saying you could have probably excelled in this, but you have to do certain things to do that. I would assume.
yeah, I think so, and I think for example, if I had to, I would go have coffee with someone that I needed to, but I didn't go out of my way to try to get a coffee with people, because I knew that that coffee might lead to other situations or conversations that I didn't want to have. I didn't want to
The
have to.
opportunities, right?
Yeah,
Opportunities.
correct. Opportunities that I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse, kind of opportunity.
Yeah, you haven't seen him, but I'll show you a little bit. Let me see if I can get him over. Wrong way. But basically I've got Brando right there.
Yep, there you
Just
go.
right there. He's sitting there.
Well,
I've got Travolta over here. You can't even see him, but
I mean, the government is the mafia now, so it's very appropriate, that comes up
you know,
in our conversation. But
it's funny. I actually brought that up. My girlfriend has never watched The Sopranos. And I'm like, what better way to share libertarian viewpoints and what the government is than through The Sopranos? So we start watching it, and I'm like, my love, tell me a little bit. Okay, so you're familiar. What's the mob do? And she's like, well, they protect. They tell you they protect you, but if you don't pay them, they don't protect you. And I'm like, does that sound similar to something like taxes? Like you have to pay them, or else you're in trouble if you don't. And for that money, you get certain protections from other things. This is sound a little broader, and watching like the individual things and go, oh, that this happened to be the SCOTUS hearing, and this was the this is Tony beating up this guy. Well, this is this specific event that happened in our government. You know what I mean?
yeah, and you can make a lot of those parallels. You definitely can, and even down to the rackets that the mafia runs, and we could talk a lot about the military-industrial complex or the pharmaceutical medical complex, and those kind of things,
I
which
mean,
you could really equate there.
in an interesting way, like the Trump thing that they were using in Georgia, for example, they're using RICO, the same RICO that it's trying to shut down the protesters for Cop City that's going on down there. So it's like, it's like the consistency. It's like, be careful of the powers given, not how they're used. Don't give the powers away because of how they might be used, right?
Yeah, for sure. And we can talk more about that maybe a little bit later in terms of sort of what is so hard for me to watch on the left these days in terms of we'll take the power for us and we'll just assume that no one we ever don't want to use it is going to get it. But that's a whole other topic, which maybe we can talk about later. So I spent 20 years in Washington. I was starting to sort of get a little bit, I don't know, disillusioned. I really thought I could make a difference. I was a classical liberal, which I kind of forgot over my years in Washington, but I really thought maybe I can make a difference in the government. I can work from the inside to make it better. And after, I think, when I first got there, things seemed to work better, and people on both sides talked to each other and actually tried to come up with some solutions to make things better, if you believe government can ever make things better, which is a separate conversation. But they were at least able to have civil conversations and
Right. And
talk.
you had honest actors. You had somewhat honest or more honest actors. Like, let's be honest, the classic liberals still held a job.
Yeah,
They held a 9 to
sure.
5. Like most of the classic liberals worked hard. They just had this little slightly more, whatever you want to call, compassion in this different way. Just like, hey, not everybody had the chances I did, so maybe we should all work together or something. There's some kind of ideology, but it's certainly not what the left is now. Just like the right isn't what the right is. MAGA is not what the right is. It doesn't represent the right. It's its own cult. You know what I mean? And we have to balance these things. Sure.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's true. I like to say I didn't leave the Democratic Party; it left me. And I talk about
that
how
way. It seemed to have taken a left turn.
Radicalized. Yeah, it became extremely radical, and it happened very incrementally. So positions on things slowly changed, until all of a sudden you're way out here, and if you don't agree exactly with what we're saying, then you are a ist or an ism or a phobic. You are racist or transphobic or whatever they want to call you.
And let us not forget, in the 2000s, Hillary and Obama, I believe, both spoke against gay marriage, for example, as one example.
Yeah.
So this is just 15 mere years ago. This same group that's classically liberal, which is a different set, like we're all different. Like there shouldn't be labels, but generally, this general group of people had this certain ideology. It just got completely hijacked in some.
It got hijacked and co-opted, and it is exactly compassion that led this to happen, and we can talk more about that, but I believe that it's compassion that is weaponized into fear and anger. And then they lose sight of the compassion for the other people that get affected, because they've been programmed and indoctrinated to believe that there's a certain group of people that deserve their compassion, whereas others don't. And so
I use two examples very quickly. I'm sure we'll talk about them. One would be COVID. Don't kill your grandmother. Take the jab. Take the jab. Take the jab. The other one would be trans women in women athletes. That's a fair thing. It doesn't take at all into consideration the effort and the work and the merit of the actual biological woman in that case. Those are two where I would think would.
And those are two examples in the book that I use, and with the trans one, I would even take it a step farther, because you could say for going into the restroom, with members of, and
or jail, right? Or for example, prison, where people are saying like, there was one in California, for the example, he raped somebody and impregnated them, and then at the trial was like, I am trans, with a full beard. It's like, wait, I mean, okay, great, but come on. Like where does the compassion just become so blind that it hurts everyone else? You know what I mean?
Well, and I think one of the things that may be also important to think about, and I don't call the members of the left liberals anymore. They're progressives. They want us progressing towards communism. That's what they want. That's progress. And part of what they are attempting to do is eliminate objective reality so that they can control your thoughts and your language, and the party is always right, and so you look to the party. And why that works on a lot of progressives is that they need external validation, Mark. They need everybody else who is a progressive to think that they're good, they're smart, and they're right. So if they are told you're supposed to only care about the trans kid and not about the little girl who is afraid to go into the locker room with a little boy who has a penis, you can't stand up against that, or else you'll be excommunicated, canceled.
You're phobic. You're transphobic.
Yeah, you're phobic. Yeah, and so that is a big part of how they control people. This is the only way you're allowed to think and speak, and if not, then you're bad. And most progressives need to be told they're not bad, that they're good. And so
I think most people need to be told that they're okay people. I think we're all been told that in some way, if we're not X, Y, or Z, that we're the ones who created the problems for X, Y, and Z. And I don't know how you can directly correlate those two pieces. I totally understand that we have to intermingle and collaborate in some way, but it seems like a very big jump to make.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't disagree that all humans want to belong and want to be accepted and believe that they're good. I think, though, what
I don't think all people. Oh, I want to be clear. I don't think all humans are good at all. I mean, I just
no,
want to be
or
clear.
yeah, no, I think most humans are good. I don't believe that they always act that
Right, and
way.
I also think they generally want to get along. That more than
I
anything,
think
we know we need to coexist, right? I mean, Spike Cohen did the whole thing about respect. Is like, how many people did we interact with on the way to Freedom Fest from our hometown, from where you were, obviously in the East, and me from where I'm at? It's like you still had to have these weird social contracts. Someone wasn't just going to like up and stab you out of nowhere. It's just is the thing.
that is very true. I think the difference is that, and there are a number of reasons for this that we could talk about, Mark. But the difference is that I think that with the fear-based reality that most progressives live in, I don't think that a lot of people who are not progressive live in that same fear-based reality. And the fear creates motivations that don't exist in someone. And the fear also, the identity of a progressive becomes so integral to who they are, their self image, their self esteem, in a way that other people, their ideology.
Identity politics, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, so
What's interesting, I find for you and I possibly is we had the fear of nuclear. You probably slightly more than I, but duck and cover and all that stuff. We had the nuclear fear. That was the Cold War, all the way through the 80s until the clash right at like 1990, right? Then this climate thing comes in, but somehow the climate thing has taken a control to the point where like we can't even stop it. At least with the nuclear one, we tried to disarm to an extent, right? We had some peace treaties written to disarm, but the climate thing has taken this animal and gotten into the skin of the youth to a point where I don't know how it's festered so strongly.
well, I think again,
And we
when
ignore the nuclear part right now. While we're escalating nuclear war, we're actually ignoring that part. Like, I know it sounds weird, but it's almost like become this weird kind of shift. I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
yeah, I think, and that's a really good point. I mean, we are potentially at the brink of nuclear conflict in a couple of different theaters at the moment, or maybe even three, really, four. Yeah,
Minimum
three.
two, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, at least two, and they're
Well, I
simmering
know
back with
the
triumph.
escalation from one. I know one wants everyone gone. I know that one. But then you've got the other one where we're kind of escalating, that we're
Yeah,
pushing.
where we are escalating, and I think, with how to explain it. I think that for younger people, especially who didn't live through the Cold War, I think that they've never really had nuclear. They don't have the same kind of fear. I'm not even sure what they've been taught, to be honest. Our schools are such a mess about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm not even sure what they know about what the effect of a nuclear weapon would be. And again, for us, it was just drilled into us, nuclear
Right.
winter
Well,
radiation.
I think what they're missing is Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Dresden. It's like, yeah, that's why the Geneva Convention was written. It's not like that. It's not like that was done in spite of the things that we did. These were actions that led to corrections in war in some way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we completely flip that up. So I hate to keep getting off case,
No,
off
it's
track for
okay.
that. So
But
I
we
love
can
the
get
flow of a
back.
conversation, but I love for you to just let's get back on track a little bit more to
Sure,
your thing and
sure.
how you got disillusioned, and
I
then
was a
what
little
was
bit
the next piece
disillusioned.
after that?
Well, I think the next piece to kind of let you know is that um, in right around 2000, the end of 2008, my dad got sick, and um, I had I spent between then and 2016 dealing with the healthcare system for my parents. And in my mom, while my dad was very ill, became diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and asked me to
Sorry to hear
try to
that.
help save her, And So I did a lot of research and found out that what our federal regulatory agencies were doing was not exactly what one might hope for if they were actually protecting us and doing what would be needed to keep us healthy. And I learned a lot of things about what one would want to do in order to keep themselves well. And that kind of disillusioned me even more about our healthcare system and our agencies, but I had to just sort of push that aside and go back to work after my mom died. And then President.
If I may, on the health side,
Sure.
I have an ex-girlfriend that whose father was diagnosed with stage 4 metastasized cancer. They gave him 6 months to a year and a half. And I was working with cannabis and hemp and CBD at the time, and I'd gotten him on. I'm not a doctor, I'm not anything, but I got him on Rick Simpson oil, got him on these very extreme, high doses of CBD and whatnot. And he just passed last month. I mean, 9.5 years he made it, and they gave him a year and a half. And I'm absolutely certain that a lot of the holistic things that we did that were off label or something certainly helped in some way. I can't say that anything's a miracle or anything, but it's interesting. Once again, to your point, you had a similar, an experience with the healthcare system and everything you want to do to help. I'm sure you met some roadblocks along the way.
I did. I mean, my mom was given the get your affairs in order, you probably have months, not even 6 months to a year. It was an extremely aggressive kind of uterine cancer that she was diagnosed with. And we changed her diet. We got her off all of the toxic everything except for she stayed on some pharmaceutical medication, which I think probably did not help. But that being said, she was cancer free for 2 years. I got her completely cancer free before she finished her first round of chemo. And then a small growth appeared back at the original site, and they put her back on, gave her another chemo treatment, and it fried her kidneys, and she died, like right away. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, just to be frank about it, chemotherapy is poison. And they
It
just
literally tries to kill cancer before it kills the patient. It's
exactly.
literally a race,
And
it's not even a race. It's like a marathon that you are it's just not a fun one to run.
no. So and and it destroys your immune system. It's like the exact opposite of what you want to be doing if you have some sort of health issues. So I went back to DC, and then Donald Trump got elected president, and I was grieving my parents, and I thought that the world was over. I thought that he was going to undo all the progress that we've made. He was going to destroy the environment. He was going to do all these horrible things. So I decided that I was going to get a weekly massage because I needed some stress relief, for what I knew was going to happen.
Well, I mean, you also had you have a rough thing with your family, and then this on top of it. You were talking, your family is your foundation, and then you've got this ideological dissonance with the person who is taking over.
Correct. Yeah. So it was, my whole world was
It's
pretty
stressful.
much stressful. And so
by the way, that probably told you were on the right path for whatever was about to change, because it is true. For some reason, as you align yourself with the current of whatever it is, those obstacles start mounting. They start getting in the way, and it's not a test, but it's like you turn away or you don't. And if you don't turn away, trust me, the other side is going to be net better than where you started. But if you turn away, it's probably going to be net not as good.
Not as good. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah, definitely. So I did end up getting massages once a week for 2 years, and became really good friends with my massage therapist. And then once he quit giving massages to pursue a different business, he and I started a relationship because we had become very good friends.
Absolutely,
And
that's great.
Yeah. But he thought very differently than I did, and he was
And
not really.
that's the thing.
Yeah, it is a thing. People ask me a lot when I'm talking to them about this. Did he red pill you? And I said, no. He provided me an opportunity to open my mind myself. Nobody was going to tell me anything, because that's the first thing I would say. You can't tell a member of a cult anything, because if you're not an expert in their mind, and we can talk about what that means in a little bit more detail later, or you're not in authority, then they aren't going to listen to you at all, because they only listen to those folks. So.
And we talked about that. For example, the Democratic Party hijacked again by elites, and I think elite is in your title somewhere, correct?
The title is the full title of the book is Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites: How I Escaped the Progressive Cult.
Right. So exactly to my point. So these elites come in and they look at this, PhD, masters, blah, 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 Dr. Jill, all this stuff, but they don't understand the experience of conservatism in any way. It's all in a vacuum. It's not practiced. It's purely ideological. And there's almost no foundation on some of it. Now, obviously, the ideas are always good, but I saw some statistic about if you are from the progressive left or whatever they call it now, the percentage of them that watch anything outside of, say, CNBC or MSNBC is very low. Yet, if you go to the person who tends to be more conservative or more extreme on that side, they tend to at least watch other shows. They might be yelling at the screen the whole time, but they'll put on CNN. So I don't know if you ever saw that statistic, but it was an interesting one that I saw. I'm curious. It sounds to echo exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it does. I mean, most of the people that I knew and were in the work circles that I ran in watch CNN or MSNBC, a lot of MSNBC. And, they basically thought Fox News was all lies. And, I don't even think Fox News is actually a true independent conservative.
No, it's a controlled opposition for corporate uniparty. Trust me, it's Rupert Murdoch, and I can get into Rupert Murdoch all day because it's not even a joke. I'm not kidding. One of the biggest flips for me. Once again, all I want is more information. I have been compelled to change my mind. You've been deprogrammed. I've been deprogrammed. We talk about this stuff. Michael Jackson. It was Michael Jackson that was one of the ones for me where I was on the side. I watched the HBO stuff. I watched all of the propaganda thrown about him and everything. And I watched this other documentary, and I spoke with Taj Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew, for almost 3 hours, and just rationally watched this other documentary and watched jurors on the thing with Michael Jackson and just debunk all of it. And then overlay that story over top of every story and see where the lies are. Because now, for example, they started something, NPR. I just asked her to listen to the radio in the morning, and I go, hey, put on the NPR. And my girlfriend's in the kitchen with me, and they go, oh, we're going to do this. The Heritage Foundation is really actively thing. I go, let me guess. I go, they're going to say Project 2025. And no quicker could I say it than that came out, because you knew it was propaganda. You knew something was they're going to tie it to some negative thing. And she doesn't even recognize it. And it's not anyone's fault. Certainly not her fault or anyone. They don't know to look. Once they know to look, they look. And that's that deprogramming that you kind of allude to.
Yeah. And that, I think, so I think it took a lot for me to start questioning again. And I think that is really where we are in the story, is basically I had planned to retire from that work in March of 2020. And that was planned since October of 2019. So if you think back to March of 2020, beginning of COVID, right after the initial quote unquote 14 days to slow the spread.
I was in Vegas the day that MGM shut down. It was crazy.
Oh, wow. That must have been really crazy.
I have a picture of the intersection in Vegas, right where Giada's is, right where we were, the Horseshoe and Caesars and all, and Caesars and Bellagio, not a car, not a single car. Crazy.
So weird. I'm an avid reader, and I've watched a lot of movies. And so, as soon as they started telling us they were going to shut everything down, I decided I didn't want to be in Washington, D.C. That's where I lived. And if they decided they had shut down international travel, if they decided to shut down domestic travel, like you can't leave your state, DC is allowed people down so easily. So I said, let's get out of here, to my now boyfriend, who was my massage therapist and who is now my fiance. But
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So we were going to go to an Airbnb because I said, let's go out in the woods so we can get outside, because one of the best things you can do for yourself to keep yourself healthy is get sun and breathe fresh air.
Sun and vitamin D and fresh air. What a shock.
Correct.
Exactly. It's like opening a window is like the oldest wives' tale, best remedy you could ever do when you're sick.
Yeah. So, but because we didn't know how long this was going to last and all of that, and because we were thinking of getting one for retirement to go travel anyway, we bought an RV and we went out to West Virginia where a lot of his family was living, and went close to his kids and his grandparents in case they needed something, we could go help them during the pandemic. While we were out there, he and I were having very heated discussions because he didn't buy the pandemic from the beginning. And I was living a life led by fear, hook, line, and sinker, didn't want to die, didn't want to kill anybody, especially not grandma, So he and I were getting into a lot of heated discussions. At the same time, everything they were recommending made no sense to me from a health perspective based on what I had learned when I did all the research from, for my mom, and that including don't go outside, right?
And also watching, for example, Anthony Fauci at the beginning talking about how little masks are effective and doesn't matter, and then all of a sudden flipping, and it's like it's like you have to at least show your work. You can't just make a statement. Show me. I understand ideology and sometimes I don't get it, but if you just show me how you got there, and at least we can then have the conversation. But you say X and then you say Y, and it's like they're just complete opposites, and it literally completely creates some problems.
Yeah, 100%. And that's an example in the book is masks, and I have, some of his emails and his statements. And he basically said that it would be more practical to have masking, everybody mask and it's like, well, that's not science.
Yeah, it was more to keep everybody in order and keep everybody in line and keep everybody doing. And
yeah, and then the 6-foot social distancing, it didn't make any sense to me, and there's no science to support it.
And it turned out to be completely made up.
He's since admitted that, but I also happen to know that one thing standing 6 feet apart does is keep each other out of our energy fields. So the energy that you emit that brings me happiness because you're happy, I can't feel it. The love that all of the positive emotions. So we're isolated. We're out of each other.
There's a social aspect to it.
Correct.
Social
exactly.
energy.
So that was going on, but that in and of itself was not enough to break the dam. It was the censorship. It was the fact that somehow I remembered I'm a classical liberal, and they were violating every one of our First Amendment rights, every one of them. Our right to associate, our right to assemble, our right to speak, our right to practice our religion, free exercise of it, and even our right to a free media, a free press, were being violated. And on the other hand, you had all the people who were, these science deniers and these idiot morons saying, research it yourself, go check yourself. And that.
Oh, you mean read? Don't read, Lisa. How dare you?
I know. Just watch our TikTok videos and our YouTube. And
pay no mention to the man behind the curtain or whatever, right?
Exactly,
or pay no mind.
Yeah. So we were having a heated discussion one day, and two things happened. I couldn't believe that the government that I had worked for and worked with and trusted would do this, right? Would do this to the world. And he asked me this question, Mark. He said, if they'll poison our water, what won't they do? And now I already believe that they poison our water with fluoride and chlorine, and who the heck knows what else they put in it.
Yeah, well, my understanding was from the fluoride thing, and I could be wrong, but my understanding, and I don't care if I'm being fact checked. We're having a conversation. This isn't a news hour. The fluoride was some kind of leftover from the World War II, I think, where it just couldn't do anything, so we just dumped it in the water to disperse it because it can't be converted or something into some other kind of chemicals or something. It's
yeah, it is a waste product from some manufacturing, I believe.
Ammunition, possibly. It might be. I forget what it was.
Yeah.
Once again, I don't want to smear it more than it has to be. It's already bad enough,
It is bad enough, but I mean, there's plenty of peer
And
reviewed
Flint and Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, where showing that fluoride damages young developing brains,
Right.
especially. But and so I already believe they're poisoned our water, and they tell us it's safe for us, and they do all sorts of scientific mumbo jumbo, which we could talk about in order to try to convince us that it actually is. But
You like take an entire sip of water, like Flint, where they're like, let's take a whole sip. Okay, and we're good. Okay, we're gonna leave now.
But let's not talk about the fact that it's also in every soda you drink. It's also in every processed food product that has
microplastics on top of it. The containers that are holding everything now we're seeing these things happen.
Right. Yeah, we are. Right. So
in this heated debate,
he asks this question, and then he says something else, and I don't actually remember what he said after that because my brain sort of froze. And then he said, if you don't believe me, go research it yourself. Prove me wrong, please. Prove me wrong. And I said, or probably yelled at the time, fine, I will. And then I started actually asking questions and researching, and I went down rabbit hole, so to speak, after rabbit hole, and nothing has ever been the same. Nothing. But what I really did was allow myself to.
And by the way, that break you had is literal. That is literal cognitive dissonance. It is at that moment when your literal subconscious, your ego, your whole world absolutely just snaps and you completely freeze. You do not know what to do. It's worse than Biden on stage. It's literally that bad.
Yeah, it is. It's worse than that. And I mean,
but it's eye-opening. I mean, getting through that is such a beautiful thing, but oh man, that is such an uncomfortable feeling when you're in that.
And the past 3 years have been extremely challenging. I guess past 4 now, very uncomfortable. And for me, especially my life, not just my identity personally, but my entire identity was
friends, relationships, other things, family, all that.
Work, family. But I was a public advocate for Democrats, for all of this ideology that now was called into question for me. And
I'm sure you got painted somewhat woke at some point, right? With the way they were doing that right before you had left.
It had really just started before I retired.
I'm glad you didn't have to go through that because I think that's just the opposite badness. It's like it doesn't solve the problem. Just coming up with a term, you know what I mean?
No, yeah, it didn't. And I had retired by the time this happened, so I wasn't working. But I think you hit the nail on the head with cognitive dissonance, Mark. And I think what one of the differences is, I think progressives can handle a great deal of cognitive dissonance compared to free thinkers. They just really can. And so that's why you see them holding very seemingly hypocritical views all the time. And I think
there's an openness. I think Jordan Peterson has this part locked down. He's not right about the current stuff. He should leave the Daily Wire immediately. But like I said, just like Andrew Yang has one thing right, and it's about police officers getting purple belts in jiu-jitsu, nothing more. This is where Jordan Peterson has it right. He totally understands that chaos and structure, the chaos and order. We need about an 80% chaos or order to keep that foundation going. But without that 20% chaos, we can't grow and adapt for when changes do come. So we stay too structured, we die. We get too ethereal, we die. We're in the stage of this part of ethereal nature where we can just say concepts that are true, that are just to be, because we believe they are, so our mind can overcome what actual reality is. And it's like, you can't conceptualize facts. You can't make physics a concept. It's like a law. It exists. It's a thing that is. Biology is a thing.
Yeah, biology is a thing. But if you are trying to get complete control and move
but I don't think it's those open-minded people who are doing the control, right? Once again, it's the hijackers using compassion as a tool.
Correct.
To get to their means. Just like, look, guns are a tool. It's how they are utilized. If I'm hunting for food for my family, a gun certainly cannot be bad. But if I'm here to inflict harm or tyranny on another, then guns are not good. It is not the gun. It is the method in which it is wielded and used, just like compassion and these laws and regulations and things like that.
Yeah,
so the dissonance.
Correct. The dissonance, yeah. It allows for, it's kind of like when you have a now sitting member of the Supreme Court unable to define a woman in her confirmation hearing because she's not a biologist. It's like to that level of dissonance. And
well, thank goodness. Hold on. Thank goodness for Chevron deference then, because we don't need someone in a white coat who's been ideologically. Have you seen some of those hearings where they're actually able to somehow dance around a biological male being a female? I mean, some of those are absolutely ridiculous. It is the biggest tap dance I've ever seen.
Well, it is.
And this has nothing to do with choice. It's not about choice. This is literal about facts. Like, just about facts.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I always get back to if you have a Y chromosome, you're a male, and if you don't, you're a female. And nothing you do will change that. And that permeates the majority of cells in your body. So, but
easy peasy.
Yeah, it's easy. If you're an adult, I support you doing whatever you want to your body. Go for it. Love who you want, do whatever you want, as long as it's consenting adults and it's legal. Go ahead, do it. I don't care. But when you start messing with the kids, that's where I have a problem. And when you start to tell me what I can say or not say,
compelled speech, right? It's just as bad as banning or censoring free speech is making someone speak a certain thing.
Yeah, because it can be worse because you are then compelling my thought. In order to speak it, I have to think it. And so and that is where you're getting into.
It's 1984.
It's 1984. It is. So it's double speak, it's new speak, it's all of the speaks from 1984. And there's a lot of 1984 theme in my book because, we carry our telescreens with us in our pockets. And I jokingly say that my old colleagues, we had our 3-minute hate against Donald Trump, if you recall the book. I don't know if you do. I will say that my fiance and I reread it. We had both read it in the past, but we read it out loud to each other during the COVID lockdowns. And it was horrifying, but so accurate, in terms of what it is that we are really going through. And what I came to the conclusion that the cultural revolution towards communism that has been many generations actually in the making here in the United States. We
talk about Yuri Bezmenov, for example. I had Naresh Vissa on he is a CNN contributor. I met him through Freedom Fest. He
Okay.
flagged me down. I spoke. That was I think my last podcast or a couple podcasts ago, and he talks about obviously China and all that's parts, but he talks about, to your point, what you were just talking about and how powerful that is.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's about compelling how people think. So when you control how someone speaks, and they've been doing this since the 70s with political correctness. That's how it started. And again, it's like the frog in the in the cold water that you slowly turn the temperature up. It's the incremental. Okay, so it back then, you don't want to say this word because it's not nice, but the least that happens, or the worst that happens, is that they tell you it's not nice. Now you can
Right.
get canceled and all of that, and the language keeps getting more language, and more language is now politically incorrect, right? So
Yeah, and the point I was trying to make, I apologize. I skipped.
sorry, go ahead.
I get Bidenitis. I swear. I got a little Swiss cheese memory. But the point, Yuri Bezmenov, I think in 1984, had that speech where he's an ex-KGB, and he talks about how they infiltrate the schools. And I mean, if you can exactly blueprint the time frame and and literally the generation exactly overlay that, it's absolutely true. What I was trying to get to is Naresh was talking about TikTok and how much more
Yeah,
exacerbated it is because of its influence. And that, for example, that China's taken the Bezmenov mold and has been able to really put that on a steroid model because it's captured our 3-second attention spans. It's pretty impressive in
it
a
really
very diabolical way,
Oh
sure.
yeah, in a very diabolical way. And we could have, I'm somewhat of a Luddite sometimes. I
I don't even know how we're talking right now. I'm not gonna lie.
no, I don't either. But I also, while I would never have been able to wake up probably without technology, because it provided me the opportunity, go into
Information.
the library and yeah, to find information. At the same
I
time,
had the encyclopedias at home. That's all you had. They were fixed. You got them once every, 5 years or whatever. Come on. That's what we had,
that's what we had. And the card catalog at the library, and
Microfiche, maybe.
yeah, no, yeah, I was a debater in high school and college, and I spent a lot of time in the microfiche and macrofiche rooms,
And
looking at.
microfilm.
Yes, indeed. And so, but at the same time, technology is also, I think, ruining us in many ways. So
And what it does actually, I see it like money. This is or anything that we have too much of, or something where too much of a good thing can get dangerous. Is something like, what is it? Money would make me a better person. Money doesn't make you better. Money enhances what you are as a core person. If you aren't a great person, that money's just going to give you means to be more like less of a great person. I don't know why that is, but it's just who you are, right? It's not what you are, So
indeed,
it's same thing with this, like it's almost the same exact kind of thing. It's how it's used,
it's how it's used, and sadly, all you have to do is go out and go to dinner and look around you. And most families, the kids will be looking at a phone or a tablet throughout dinner. No one's talking to each other. And it's a babysitter now. And what I worry about most with it is the kids. I think that a huge part of why we see the trans situation, gender ideology spreading in the way it is. The first thing is in the classrooms, to get back to your point about the education system. We have school districts in the United States where 7-year-olds are filling out pronoun worksheets, without ever asking to be doing that. And, I've seen many.
And let's jump in. Let's talk about it right now. California Bill AB 1955.
Oh yeah,
Gavin
sure.
Newsom. Gavin Newsom just signed into law. There's a woman, I just saw her, she's suing. She was a PE teacher. She was not allowed to tell the parents. And she's asking, I have to lie to them? And they say, for the safety of the children, you have to lie to the parents of the children and let the beautiful teachers in the state of California, in the California Board of Education, protect and be your parent.
No.
Why are we treating the state like our parent? It is our child. We should be spanking it at every possible, like, I don't understand how we have allowed this lack. It's like, because we don't want the responsibility that's associated with it, almost, in a generation that we got coddled. And it's kind of the Jonathan Haidt book, Coddling of the American Mind, and how we just got soft because it was a little harder. But we're just trying to make it better. It's just cyclical. It's that cyclical kind of motion.
Well, I think that there is part of that, but it is also, I think, purposeful. I mean, part of what the Cultural Revolution requires is destruction of the nuclear family. It requires the state to be the parent. It requires, and so this is brilliant in a diabolical cultural revolution effectuation way.
So it's agenda driven and in a weird way, in that perfect cultural time to take advantage of the agenda in that way.
Correct, exactly. It's definitely, in my opinion, it is. I mean, Karl Marx argued, that the family is where let me make sure I get this right. The patriarchy means something, but basically that you have to break down the nuclear family in order to make everybody, the ward of the
equal,
state.
the same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the school, and doing this, keeping a transition from the parents, does that beautifully. It creates, first of all, your parents are not safe. The state and the school is, and it
promotes secrecy. It promotes deception. It promotes a rift between the parent and the teacher and everyone else, between the institutions itself, to even make it more of a rift and pry, so that they can call the FBI and call them terrorists and get arrested. It's unbelievable what's going on.
And I think, I will say that, again, I think people are becoming more informed because of the internet and the ability to get information. But I think the changes that happened in our schools flew under the radar for most people who did not have children, who were actively going to school. Yeah, I mean, until I started writing this book, I had no idea what was really going on. How, basically kids are being taught that, not about the unique history of the United States. It's the unique place it has because of our Constitution and the amendments that guarantee our natural rights, natural born, God given, creator given rights. But rather we should be ashamed to be a member of this country.
The colonialist imperialism that stole all the land from the Native Americans, which is true, which isn't, it's not a lie, but to call it that, it's not what that was. I mean, my understanding is, I recall, if we utilized some of the assertiveness and aggressiveness of some of the Native Americans initially, and then turned, right? I mean, we helped others to wipe out other tribes. That was a savage time. We were awful then. We can both acknowledge that and say we are not that anymore, nor should we be. And then we see the Middle East and we go, we shouldn't be that.
No, and that's, to be fair, I was going to say too, like, that was the entire world then, and
absolutely. And once again, we just have to take context changes the content. This is absolute fact that we just have to deal with, unfortunately,
Yeah, so I don't think most people knew how the curriculum was changing. I don't think most people understood how the curriculum at colleges that teach teachers changed. And I mean, when you literally have professors, for example, saying that math is racist, and teaching teachers that math is racist. I mean, I saw a professor who said that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is racist. And having just read 1984, where the entire way that they break his mind is getting him to say that 2 plus 2 equals 5, this, hits home pretty hard that this is what is going on. This is indoctrination
Yeah.
to control children's minds. So,
And it's so funny when we talk Freedom Fest real quick. I mean,
sure,
they called it Brave New World, right? And it
yeah,
was like, I remember speaking with Valerie early on, and I'm like, Valerie, yes, and it's 1984. It was almost like, were we going and it's like we're all combining the two into some mega storm of some ridiculousness while our debauchery and all this other craziness is being let go. It's also being censored from the other side. It's like, what is going? I don't even know how all of the forces are converging at once.
it's funny. I actually, and this, I think my fiance said this first, but it's in the book. We actually call it a brand new Handmaid's 1984, because we're having some fertility issues as well, which that brings
Yep.
in the Handmaid's Tale.
The teleals and everything like that, the taint
Yeah,
distance and things like that as well with yeah.
yeah. So you have to kind of joke about it, because otherwise, it's pretty. It's like I thought these were
Yeah.
supposed to be warnings. These books, not instruction manuals. But here is where we find
Yeah.
them, or game
I'm
plans.
trying I'm trying to playfully think it's that simulation theory, and they hit that chaos mode on the simulator, like remember
Yeah.
that Sims and whatever, you hit the tornadoes or the just random whatever. I'm like, they just hit chaos and just like let it.
Well,
It's time.
chaos
It's time to hit reset.
chaos is so um, control of language, control of reality, and then chaos in the cities. That was what Mao did in China to effectuate the Cultural Revolution. So what we saw in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter riots, yes, was very reminiscent. And when you
By
hear,
the way,
yeah,
the fist was stolen from the CIA coup back in was it Yugoslavia? Mike Benz did a breakdown on it, and
oh, did he?
basically the Black Fist literally was there. And it's even funny because it's spray paint on the wall. And if you look at Candace Owens, she did a spoof with the dollar sign or the dollars in the fist. It's kind of a spoof all that, because that has been used by the CIA abroad and tested to come home to roost. I mean, we are now using our deep state in this full circle way. We are becoming the banana republic that we initiated around the world. We just tested it everywhere. And the crazy thing about this one was, it was Black Fist, and then someone put a big picture of Madeleine Albright on it. And you obviously know Madeleine because you
I
lived in those
do.
circles.
I
I
do.
mean,
Yeah.
Madeleine Albright, come on. When she said 500,000 Iraqis dead was an okay thing or something, it's like, whoa, help me. How can one justify? So I hate
Well,
to jump
and
away, but go ahead.
no,
Go ahead. I'll let you finish that
yeah.
thought.
So I no, but along those lines, I think part of what allows that to happen is when you lose sight of any principles that guide your decision making. And where we are is that the ends justify the means now. The ends justify the means, and they have done a fantastic job of dehumanizing the other. Whatever that other is. If
Yeah.
you're a black person, that's a white person. If you are um,
Yeah. Othering. Just
trans,
othering.
it's just the othering. Men and women.
Anything.
All of it, all of the division. When they're not, when
I mean, they're even dividing single and married in this weird, twisted way. And it's like,
oh
we're
yeah,
all adult humans.
yeah,
Okay. Or, whatever, in that way.
it is everything they can divide and conquer. It's the old, put some fear in there, divide and conquer, and it is mechanisms of control, to get people to do whatever it is you want, and I think a large, go ahead, yeah, a
No,
large part,
please. I was, yeah.
yeah, a large part of this, to me, is that we're really in a battle, for a spiritual battle for our souls, for the soul of our country, for the soul, for our very own souls. And, one of the things that I find a lot is that when you talk to someone who has religious faith of any kind or spiritual faith of any kind, a connection to the creator, however they believe, it's much harder to do that to them because they have principles that are grounded in their relationship with the creator. And it is much harder when you understand and have a belief that we all come from the same place. We're all going back to the same place. We're all created either in the image of the creator, or we all have the same energy that flows through us that comes from the source to other people, to make them
Yeah.
into another, because we're all the same. And
Yeah.
I think that's why it is in part so effective with many people who are progressives, because they do not have any relationship.
Yeah. So if I may even take just half a step back,
Sure.
is just the foundations of some value system that aligns, at least, right? Because it's almost, I mean, we talk Judeo-Christian values, and yes, we can talk Bible, God, but we can also just take a half a step back and go to the values that instilled upon courtesy, opening a door, please, thank you, we're all in this together, there's no need for me to climb over you because there's plenty of room on the bus, and there's plenty of room in the elevator, and there's all of those things that we've allowed to whittle over time. And I think those are interesting traditions that would be passed through generation that I think has not been passed. Like I have seen young people that I can't even make eye contact when I try to shake their limp, dead fish hand. And it makes no sense to me. I don't even understand it.
Well,
I'm like,
I think there's a number of things going on there. I do think technology again has part of it. Part to
it's withdrawn from that ability to be social. To your point, to connect
completely. Yeah, technology makes people. It's easy to like call someone a name behind a screen. It's a lot harder to actually interact with someone. And it's very easy to stay within a bubble, an information bubble, a social bubble, when you are primarily
And the
online.
algorithm does that. I mean,
It
the
does it.
algorithm gives you what you want. I mean, that's kind of what it's not a bad, once again, another tool. It just happens to be what we're interested in is what we're interested in, and it exacerbates that.
Yeah, correct. I also think that I guess I'll just throw it out there, but kids since younger than you um, have been vaccinated with so many vaccines, and so many of them are on pharmaceuticals of other kinds,
Have you
SSRI.
seen the documentary Vaxxed? Have you seen Vaxxed? The
I'm not sure
original?
that I've seen that one.
I
No.
think it came out 2016.
Okay.
And it's VAXXED. Now,
Okay.
this is obviously not going on YouTube because safe and effective, everybody. Yeah, COVID safe and effective. But I have to say it allegedly. I don't know when they're going to strike me. I go on Rumble because it's ridiculous. But Vaxxed was one that Robert De Niro touted. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the guy flipped on it. And do you see what he's all of a sudden been championing? Like him going out to speak on behalf in front of the courthouse, calling projecting his complete ridiculousness onto Donald Trump. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. There's clearly a capture there. I mean, it doesn't even, and it's just enough to say there's something that they have that makes him completely withdraw from Vax, very compelling to watch. To your point, the vaccine schedule. Look, Robert Kennedy's not wrong about that stuff. You're putting a ton of unknown substances in an infant forming thing.
Oh yeah.
What do you expect's going to happen? Like, come on, what do you expect's going to happen?
I mean, they'll say, "Oh, it's only a trace amount of mercury." Well, even our FDA says no mercury is safe. So, and then
Yep.
how many traces of mercury?
As a preservative, from my understanding, right? Is the
it
mercury
is.
that right?
It is.
Right.
Like there used to be more in Thimerosal,
Yeah,
which was
yes,
removed.
yeah, there was.
However, every vaccine has trace mercury. There's aluminum. I mean, these are heavy metals are not healthy.
Caustic.
Yeah, they are.
No, absolutely
So,
caustic. Yeah.
So, and then, you wonder why.
You might as well be feeding them leaded gasoline while you're at it in a little baby bottle, right?
You might as well. I think that is a big part of it. I think that's a big part of, combining with, and I do want to say to your point that I wasn't suggesting when I was talking about having a spiritual, that is required for you to be religious, or anything like that. And I do believe you can have, you can believe in the golden rule, do unto others.
And the reason, you can use reason. I mean, a lot of the libertarian values are based in reason more than they are. They're more golden rule reason based than they are, spiritual based, for example.
Yeah,
even though they may have a spirituality behind.
But I think people have become, and I think technology contributes to this as well, so self-centered and self-focused and narcissistic.
Disconnected from everything, but it's become an island. It's become an island in a bubble, it's like literally, it's like that thing in there's the Lost in Space, the reboot where Gary Oldman is the bad guy, Dr. Smith, and there's that time bubble. That's like everybody's in their own little bubble that has different speeds in it and we're all in different paths, and we don't understand where other people are on their paths. We bump into each other, and then we don't even understand, there's immediate conflict because we don't come from, say, a foundational structure beginning or some kind of foundation in some way.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And I think, that is really, really challenging. And it's only getting worse. I mean, kids don't have an attention span. Kids can't have a conversation. I saw a professor who was talking about, kids are coming into college and can't read, so because all they do is sit in front of, a screen. And a friend of ours has two kids twins in high school. They don't have any books. Everything is in a tablet for school. So, and I say that.
And you know what they miss? You know what they miss? That smell of a paperback book or a fresh bound book that you crack open, and it has you connect to it because you add an extra sense. You actually add two. You have the touch of the paper, the feel, and the smell, and smells directly connected to memory. And I think when you read and you have that all connect, there's something that's deeper to it. And it's not an old school get off my lawn thing. It's just something about the experience, and the brain's basically been rewired for children because of the way that technology and the way it, like literally the screens, how many, screens per minute and how many, whatever frames per second, all that. It's just completely rewiring the brain.
100%. 100%. I'll add one other thing I love about books, because we have a big library in our house, and
are you Stephanopoulos level? Are you trying to get?
No, not like that. I mean,
I'm just kidding.
But what I was going to say is it can't be edited. You know that you're actually getting the actual text based on whatever edition of the book you are buying, if there are multiple editions. And that was another, and it's 1984 stuff. I watched them edit headlines. I watched them change the Ministry of Truth during COVID. I watched it happen, and I'm sitting there going, geez Louise, this is, 1984. I'm watching it. And, one example was headlines around the lie that Russia had bounties out on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. And I think it was the Washington Post, might have been the New York Times. I don't want to,
pick your poison. We can pick any of them.
And I thank goodness for the Wayback Machine, right? Or Internet Archive, because you can find it, and side by side you see the two different headlines, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, they are editing this. And how many times have they done this? At least back when there was microfiche, they couldn't change the headline on you, but now any newspaper, it is what you see when you look. And so
I have one example of that. You can type it in, and it's the one. It's shocking. It's just The Atlantic came out with an article last year that said war in Congo is good for climate. And the argument is basically the death of the carbon footprint, which is us, from everybody getting killed, the climate's better in Congo because of it. And literally, you can type in Atlantic war in Congo good for climate. They switch that, like to your point, right to something else about climate change being affected by the conflict in the Congo, in some zhuzhy way. And you're just like, you bastards.
Yeah, they do it all the time, and mostly people aren't paying attention enough to know it. And
they're holding 3 kids. They got to this work. They got a job. They got a deadline to. They got to run. They got coffee to make. They got the car to warm up. They got stuff to do. They got the electric car to charge. They're busy.
Yeah, good. Have fun for 2 hours while you're waiting for your car to charge.
Right. So you're dissonant. You then go down the rabbit hole. Let's go down the rabbit holes to your story. And I love the conversation. I know we're going to have a great long time, but I really would love for you to share a little bit of your background, because that's going to help us open this door for others to say, oh, maybe this is something, I'm kind of feeling some things similar to how Lisa's feeling.
So, yeah, I think COVID is where I started, and I just started researching. I started looking at the data, and a lot of it just the government data itself, and it was not consistent with what they were telling us or what we were doing. I researched and found a letter that went out to all morticians that required, for example, COVID to now be listed as the cause of death if there was a positive test, irrespective of whether COVID was actually what caused the death. And this is not
Did you see Rob Schneider? Did you see Rob Schneider at the comedy festival at all? Were you able to make that?
No, I wasn't able to.
Okay. I don't want to. I'll spoil it, but it's basically, there was a joke, something about skydiving, parachute didn't open, he died of COVID.
Yeah, and then I started seeing stories about this. Right, it's because of funding and the amount of money that the hospital.
And that's how they get you.
Exactly.
They get you with the green.
Yep. One of the, you saw at my table, I gave away buttons at Freedom Fest, and one of them was follow the money. You can always figure out what's real and true once you figure out who's paying for it and who benefits from it. And that is usually not what you're being told. It is something very different than that. And so it was COVID that just, I started looking at all these things and the data didn't add up. And, for example, I started looking for the studies that showed that it was transmitted asymptomatically. Well, they don't exist, except for modeling, which is the same models that said this was going to be extremely deadly. And it wasn't, and then I looked at the government data about, survival rates and who's dying and, just.
And you look at the one rate. Well, remember when they said 100% effective?
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear how they got to that zhuzhy number? Basically, it was something about one of them got it and the other one got 2. So one is 100% more than 2. Yeah. So it's 100% effective. And you're like, wait a minute, that's how you get to. That's not how science works. That's how big pharma works. That's how an industry works. That's not how science works.
And that was one thing I saw right away. And what you just referred to is the difference between a relative risk reduction and an absolute risk reduction. And the absolute risk reduction would be, 50% less people get it than if they're not vaccinated. And the numbers were so small, Mark, I'm trying to remember, but I think it was like less than 1% in the placebo, in the control group got it, and 0.5% got it in the treatment group. That would be a 50% reduction. It was ridiculous. It's all ridiculous. It was all not science.
And then in hindsight, they had the international gentleman ask the woman from Pfizer, was it even tested for transmission and contraction? And she laughed. She laughed and says, well, of course not. We were moving at the speed of science, the speed of science is not what you were doing.
No, it wasn't. I mean,
It's the last thing you were doing.
even just, do you remember all these signs that came out saying, I believe in science? Even that is absolutely ridiculous. Like, science is not something you believe in or you don't.
No,
Ghosts are
science is a
something
process to get to the truth.
it
It
is.
is to debunk and to attack until it can't be attacked anymore. That's all. And it should all be open. And it's like, to find something wrong should be celebrated more than finding something right. And it shouldn't be
Well,
criticized. It should be, in that weird way. It's like, oh man, now we're not going down the wrong path. What a great discovery in that way, in a unique way.
it really is. And I think, what is very true, this comes back to money again, because when you disprove the current theory, there are thousands of people probably across the world whose livelihood, not to mention corporate profits, depend on you being wrong and the current theory still being right. And so we could get into a discussion of peer review, because it kind of makes it very challenging to get a new theory out there. But
Well, have you heard about the one that was at peer review, would have already been captured, where, I forget what it was, a university of somebody wrote a bunch of fake articles, something about gay dogs or something, and it was peer reviewed and actually made it through all the peer reviews to some amazing thing. I'll have to share it with you, but it was one of those ones where we're finding that you and I are both from opposite ends of some uni structure that is driving the thing. To your point, it's certainly the money base somehow.
well,
And
yeah, it is definitely.
and how are we figuring that out, right? That's where the question, I guess, comes in.
Well, yeah, how do you follow the money? Is that what you mean?
Oh, I mean, how do we once we obviously know the trail, where those trails lead, how do we work on untangling the money from those institutions, right? That's really what it comes
It's
down to, right?
it's really, really challenging at this point. I mean, I don't know that we've had anything that resembles pure, true science in the past 50 years at and probably way before that. But
Yeah, even
I
food pyramid, right? Food pyramid and some other
oh,
things were
good
driven
Lord,
by industry.
it totally driven by industry. We were told that you know eggs, for example, are terrible for us, but sugar is just fine.
Cholesterol. Oh no. And then eat
Yeah,
margarine. I was in the margarine era where
oh yeah,
margarine was good for you.
and not butter. And just as an aside, I don't know if you know this, but I think our brain cells are like over 80% cholesterol. So when
Yeah, fat
you,
and cholesterol. If you have low fats, that's where a lot of strokes happen, because of conductivity, just in general, for brain conductivity. I mean, we're
yeah,
electrical creatures who need
yes, we are.
conductive fats in our bodies and oils. It's like, hello,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
We
that's a
go
whole
on.
other. We could do a 2 hour,
We could totally
talk
do a 2 hour on that one.
about all of that. But
Yeah.
the point being, it's really going to be hard to disentangle the money from the science. I don't, I think we need to sort of start from scratch in some ways in a lot of these institutions. But the minute that a scientist has a vested interest through their pocketbook or their institution's pocketbook in the outcome of a study or an experiment, then you've lost science. You're not being true to the scientific method. You're cooking the books already. So I think that I think is going to take um, a lot to undo, and a lot of people have to be involved in that conversation. And I think it starts at the universities. Um, and I think we need to come up with a way that we have blind funding for scientific endeavors. And I don't know how you do that, but if Elon Musk is listening to this, or someone, maybe else who has the money, that they could make that happen. Our government scientific agencies, NIH is completely co-opted by industry. The FDA gets
look, every industry, we've got literal people going from Johnson & Johnson in the FDA. They've already gotten the secretary. They got it through Trump. I know they used Trump's naivety against him in his first term to set precedents for corruption and evil in the second. One of them is the Secretary of Defense cannot come directly from an agency, but Trump's guy did. Was it Esper, I think, came directly from Raytheon. And that allowed the precedent for Lloyd Austin to come directly from Raytheon. And that stuff is just unfreaking acceptable, in my opinion. None of that should happen. And please continue. I just had to jump in there because people do not understand. Trump he's a semi-counter force, but he's talking about having Jamie Dimon or what's his name? Fink from BlackRock to be the Secretary of Treasury. I'm sorry, Janet Yellen wasn't bad enough, people. It wasn't bad enough. I go from 0 to 100, Lisa, and I'm just like, we're just like starting to crack these things, and it's so. Thank you. I'll let you continue. I just had to jump in there about those because it's crazy. Those things that happen in that way.
It is crazy, and it's gotten exponentially worse over the past 20, 30 years. I mean, when I arrived in DC, it was not that bad. The revolving door was, at least you had to go, take a walk around the block or a few blocks before you came back in it. And now it's back and forth and back and forth. And
look at the age of just the average age of the people and how long they've served, the average length.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think
it's an age. It's showing its age as an empire in a weird way.
And I mean, I'm not going to call you ageist. I don't think that's, true. I think that
not at all. I do not mean that in any way. That has nothing to do with wisdom, competency, or anything. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I just want to be clear as well, because I'm, I can't be canceled before I start, Lisa. I just can't.
I'm with you on that. So I think that, we have to start with the curriculum in science classes. We have to figure out a way to detangle the money.
STEM. I'm sorry, STEM. Did you see STEM? They added the A for art, and you're like, the whole point of STEM is that it doesn't have art. The whole point of STEM is that it doesn't have art.
Yeah. So I think
it's crazy.
It's gonna be hard to undo, and I think this is a good point to get to, one of the things about the progressive cult that keeps them members, and that is they idolize the expert. And they have been indoctrinated to believe that if you don't have degrees and credentials from the authority, whoever that is, then you are not an expert. And so
that's your elite. That's the point of the elite portion of your book, right?
Correct. Yeah. And you have to, so you don't question an expert. So you may see this on social media all the time. Someone will raise a point. They may have done, they may have read and done good research and have a good valid point to make, but they don't have the degree. They don't have the credentials. So they just dismiss them out of hand. They don't even give them any consideration. Like, oh, well, I see you. Where did you get your MD? And the truth is, that most doctors don't actually read more than the abstract of a study. They don't even look at the data or evidence in it, and they just parrot back what the results of the study were. And a lot of times recently, if you look at the data and evidence, it does not actually support the conclusions that are in the study. And there's no reason why someone who has gone to whatever school or gotten whatever credentials is better at looking at data than anybody else. But we have given up our right to have our own opinions, because we idolize the expert. And this is on both sides. They're just different experts.
Yeah, totally.
But it's even worse.
And the funny thing about the social media, the reason I was laughing, it made me think of a Michael Rectenwald tweet where he makes this eloquent, brilliant statement. And some guy writes back, read a book. And then Mike's like, write one. And then I'm like, you mean write 12, man? You know what I mean? Like, these people are so ignorant. They don't even know some of the people with whom they're arguing and whatever. It's like, it's become that kind of dumpster fire at times too, you know?
Yeah, it is, because without even that, well, they can't. And here's the thing that, that I point out to a lot of people is they can't let one idea in. The dissonance is so much, and it's kind of like the thread on the sweater that if you pull on it, the entire sweater collapses. And in their unconscious mind and their subconscious mind, they know that, and so it gets fight or flight. And it's, read a book. It's going to be an insult. It's going to be what can I say to
Learn
end
to
this?
code, right? It was like the learn to code of the left.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
And what's funny about that is AI took the coding probably quicker than the other jobs. Of all the jobs that you could have taken, literally the coders created the thing that completely is going to take them out of their own business.
I mean, it's gonna get rid of all jobs, basically.
Oh yeah, we know. It's just one of the funny things that it's like the first thing it attacks is that people were saying learn to code, and you're like, wait, that doesn't even work, man.
No, it doesn't.
You're actually going before the truck drivers are, for
They
real.
will. I mean, my previous profession, lawyers. Why would you need a lawyer to write a contract if AI can write a contract, and check the contract?
I saw Rep Massey. Yeah, Rep Massey was at the debt, but the debt badge counter. He was telling that he did a Chat GPT 4 and he asked for it to write a bill, and he said even the whereases and everything were in it. Whereas he said it was so accurately written, he could have just almost handed it in the way it was done.
Yeah, and there's a whole office called Legislative Counsel that writes legislation that will no longer be needed. But I will. The caveat,
if we put the correct information in the front, right? Obviously, if we lean the AI in a certain way, it's going to go a certain way. It has to make sure that it has enough of the information to find the patterns, the best net positive pattern.
Correct. I know that was the point I was about to make. Legislative Counsel, the people that work there, having worked there, they are not biased. They write what the legislators tell them to write. AI, we've already seen with Chat GPT and others that there was some bias programming in there, and
I've seen an Asian Nazi, an Asian female Nazi. It was very interesting. It was
very interesting, but so, and AI is a whole other, topic that we could probably talk about for a very long time. But I think that, and now I forgot how we got on AI, to be honest.
It's totally okay. If we may continue, just because we've been talking, and I'm loving this conversation. I can talk forever. I want to be courteous of your time as well. But
sure.
Before we get off of this other piece, is like what I'm finding that we're both finding from both ends, the corporate, whatever. It's kind of been a captured institution. As we try to fix this, you are on a farm. And I think self-reliance, teaching people self-reliance and getting away. I'm actually trying to generate some revenue from this endeavor to find a alternate place to which I can build while I'm still living in an urban lifestyle, so I can get to a rural place. And I'm trying to, juggle everything. And I think I'd love for you to talk about that before we then transition into the libertarian experience with the convention, if you're okay with that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so after living at the RV for a little while, we decided we weren't going to stay there forever, and the lockdowns were kind of dragging on. When I went back to the city, I just didn't want to be there anymore. The energy was terrible. DC during COVID was a dystopian nightmare, honestly. And I can relate this little story to you. It was July 4th, and
what year? 21?
2020, actually.
20, 20.
So, and you weren't
like early scare, like early fear. like serious
early
building
fear.
Okay.
But it was also during the summer of peace and
Summer of
BLM.
Love. Summer of
Summer
Love.
of love,
Oh,
yes.
Lori Lightfoot.
Everything
Summer of
in
Love.
DC was locked down. Every window was barricaded. There was a police officer and a light armored vehicle on every corner in downtown. And we decided to go down to the mall, and just see what was going on. And there weren't very many people there. So people listened. People were in DC overwhelmingly Democratic, overwhelmingly scared. But there were hundreds of soldiers, police officers lining the mall, and no people. Ghost town. I parked right next to the mall, and normally on the 4th of July you can't even get on the metro.
Well, yeah.
You can't even.
No, not at all, because everybody's off and everybody's doing something. Everybody's active.
Yeah, and so then DC was just a ghost town, but we managed to see a couple of groups of what I can only assume were heroin addicts on the street. We watched a heroin deal go down on the street. The dealer walked up with a cop car sitting a half a block away. It was just, and
Did you not experience that before?
No, not really. No.
Okay, because once again, we're let's talk contrast, right? Because we I'd love to see, because you were there, you've been there for many years, and now you're seeing this contrast of what it's become, or what became of it.
Yeah, so it was a contrast. I would say that yes, there are neighborhoods in DC where you could have seen that before.
Absolutely. I know that DC has just a block from White House is like pretty nasty neighborhoods, I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, do you know DC at all? Not really.
I don't know. I don't know the geography and all that. So you're welcome to share it. I'm not familiar, unfortunately.
Yeah, so what I would just say is the two places where we saw that were not places I would have seen that before. And at the second place where we saw a group of addicts, and half a block over was a DC Metro police car, we also saw two prostitutes picking up a John on the street in the middle of a family neighborhood, not a bad neighborhood, where we were going to have dinner. So this was different, and I will also say that we would see tents everywhere that we did not see tents. There's always been a homeless population, and it's always been really stark to me. And that, you walk out of a meeting, or I would walk out of $1,000 a plate fundraiser lunch and see homeless veterans on the street. And this is not okay, but it was just.
I've heard the story about the building in Virginia or whatever that has like the guys in the $3,000 suits that are all the military guys that are all just like littered, and they're in the cafeteria and they're all just chumming together and they're just swapping loads of cash back and forth. And I know it sounds like reductionist, but it's like it happens, it's happening.
It is, yeah. So we got back to DC, and the experience with the shutdowns of lack of supplies, and
toilet paper.
And toilet paper, yes. Well, and other things, depending on where you were and when you went. But yes, the toilet paper shortage, as a woman, I cannot be without my toilet paper. The other thing is that when I did all the research to try to help my mom, I had started eating organically as much as possible, lots of produce, and I said, I want to grow my own food. I want to be able to be self-sufficient. So if we stay in these lockdowns, I can go outside and I can breathe fresh air and I can get vitamin D. And, I want to be able to light a fire if I need to for warmth
and make a pizza in a brick oven.
And all of those things. And so, I had planned to travel around and, maybe retire to a beach. And instead, I will say, I do not ever say to anyone around here that I'm retired, because having a farm is not retirement in any way, shape, or form. We found this great place, and it had been in the same family owned it for 45 years.
So cool.
we're not certified organic, but grew organically for
Right, but
45.
you're doing it for yourself, right?
Yeah, so and so
Right.
we moved here, and it's been amazing. Like, I was in my garden today, and I have hundreds of tomatoes that are just about to start really ripening, and there's nothing like a tomato sandwich you grew yourself. The tomatoes you
It's
made.
gotta put a smile on your face.
It does, yeah. You get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So we have chickens, so we have eggs, and we're
You have
raising
meat
them
too?
only.
Meat chickens too, or no? Just
Um,
egg chickens.
we have chickens that could be dual purpose, but right
Okay.
now we
Yeah, I was
only
just curious.
are.
Yeah, because I know there's different kinds. So I'm kind of sharing it more for the audience, like that people don't
Sure,
even know
yeah.
that there's different kinds of chickens, literally, that they're egg chickens and meat chickens, kind of.
Yeah, so for the audience, I was shocked. I bought a couple of books and started reading, and there are hundreds of breeds of chickens. The eggs and the meat that you get at the store are literally like one breed that most industrial farming uses. And you have to pick what characteristics you want for the chickens. Like, do you care what color eggs? Because there are all sorts of colored eggs. We have three breeds of chickens. One is not really a meat chicken, but they lay blue eggs, and I wanted some sky blue eggs, so we have that. And they lay consistently. They are good layers, and they're
Right.
smaller, so they eat less.
More like quail,
So
like not quail size, but almost in that bluish quailish color, but not, or a
But
robin's egg
they
almost,
have
but bigger,
normal
right?
size. They're normal size eggs, but they would probably
Oh,
be
okay.
medium.
Like
Then
mediums.
the
Okay,
other
got it. Yeah.
chickens that I have lay large or extra large eggs, and those are ones that
Nice.
could be meat chickens also. And so we also have roosters, and you don't have to have roosters, just so you know, to get chickens to lay eggs. The only reason you need a rooster is if you want to make more chickens. And also, it is hens
I
that
hear
you're
they're
eating.
social though too. I heard they're really protective and really social roosters.
They are very protective. Sometimes they are not very nice to people because they are protective against people as well. So they are protective. So if you want to, free range your chickens, a rooster can help protect your hens. We don't free range. We have like a system of runs and things for them because we have a lot of animals. We have tons of hawks. We have fox. We have coyote.
Wow.
Not we've never
Right,
seen a
right, absolutely.
or
Yeah.
bear
Yeah.
around. So we have them in protected. And actually, one of your worst enemies for chickens are dogs. And in
Yep,
fact, one of
that's
our
correct.
neighbors
Yeah,
had
I mean
another neighbor's
they're
dog.
basically wolves. I mean, well,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
wolves genetically, so it's it's in there. It's in them.
And if a chicken runs, if anything runs, your dog is going to chase it. So, but so you can have chickens without them being loud, and so a lot of people can have chickens, and check your local urban regulations. If you do happen to have a yard, you can even have chickens in many cities as long as you don't
Yeah,
have
mine
roosters.
need to be 20 feet from my domicile or something, so it doesn't fit because it won't fit just in my neighborhood currently, for example. So I
But
can't get myself
some,
a flux capacitor, unfortunately. But it was
well,
funny. I was laughing about your the farm thing because my aunt and uncle owned a dairy farm in Pennsylvania, and they had probably about 200 Jersey cows, and they sold it for Swiss cheese, I believe was what they sold the milk for. And I
nice.
remember going there in the summers and doing all the chores and having to feed the calves and this. And I remember coming and plopping down one time, and I was like I was a kid, and I'm like, next time I'm coming as a guest. And I remember just like those moments of just like, I remember my uncle just falling asleep, taking naps for 2 hours at a time just so he could get up, and because he had to do something at this time, had to be done. And if not, the entire chain of that thing completely collapses. So
Yeah, and I
it's a
mean,
dedication.
farming is hard work, and I think people are so
Underappreciated for sure.
100%, and people are so disconnected from their food and where it comes from, and so that coming out here, we've made a lot of friends and neighbors, and they're some of the hardest working people I have ever met. I'll say something else about self-reliance, and I think people really need to think about this. At least, my experience in the city, my dad raised me to be a pretty independent woman. Taught me how to use a drill, hang things, change a tire, and I have changed tire on my car. Make sure all your fluids are topped off. But living in the city, I started to stop doing things for myself. I paid people to do just about everything for me. Um, I didn't forget
And you
how
were
to.
discouraged by your HOA to change your oil in your driveway. Also, there were also
Yeah,
outside forces too. And next thing you know, you're paying $80 for an oil change that used to cost 25.
yeah. So, and it is someone's job, so there is that. But my point is, you know, um, what would most people who live in the city do if all their apps stop working? If they can't call someone to fix the toilet or, anything like that? When you come out to the country, like, nobody does anything for you. And most people do everything themselves, to the point that we don't have garbage collection here. We take our garbage to um,
Or
a
like a
community.
landfill or dump in a
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, we have a main county dump, but then it's a large
Right. But
geographic
once
county.
again, you let it handle on yourself. And I guarantee if it starts piling up, one of your neighbors is going to be quickly knocking on your door going, get your shit out of here. I hate to say it that way, but that's kind of how it works.
Yeah,
That's where that self-reliance, the accountability comes in. These people who think government is the one who does the regulating or who's the one in control of us. No, we are in control of us as a community. There's checks and balances up and down that, because your word is your reputation. The reason, I mean, we look at some of the Eastern philosophies, the reason it doesn't work with the West is because of the way we do the stuff in the West. East was all about your word as good as your bond. That's why it was your death. If you got expelled from the tribe because you got out of line, you didn't exist anymore. That's how it was. And there's a certain beauty to watching a community dig themselves out of a snowstorm while
I,
another community sits at a stadium while water's coming up going, who's going to rescue us?
I have
It's
a
like,
snowstorm story for you, Mark. That it
oh,
just
I
came
love for
to.
you to share it. Yeah.
Yeah, we've only had one snow. We got about 14 inches, but it came pretty quickly. So, and our neighbor across the street, she was pregnant. So, um, we have a tractor that is four-wheel drive, and it has a closed cab, so you can have heat.
Yep.
And so my fiance got in the tractor and went driving around, and met our neighbor out there who was in a four-wheel drive truck. And so there was a tree that had fallen down across the road, and the neighbor got out, had his chainsaw with him. He cut the tree with the chainsaw, and my fiance moved the tree out of the road and used the bucket to help clear the snow so that people could get in and out of our road, in case of an emergency, and especially in case our neighbor went into labor. But that's the way the
And was
community.
that a Democrat or Republican road? What kind of road was that, and
Oh,
what kind of
it,
ideology did your neighbors have again? I'm sorry,
and
what did
and
they
it
believe
didn't
in?
even matter. We don't care out
Right.
here.
Thank
People
you.
don't care.
Yay.
We're humans.
Yay.
We work together,
It is
and
human ideology. Thank you.
exactly.
I want to stress that point. I just want to stress that point 100%.
We don't care. It and that's the thing I was going to say too. To your example of your neighbor holding you accountable if your garbage starts piling up. If it was like if you just moved in and your garbage was piling up, your neighbor here would come and talk to you. If you had been here a while and you had been dealing with your garbage and then your garbage started piling up, your neighbor would come and ask you if everything was okay. Like they wouldn't
Right. Oh
first
yes,
say,
absolutely. Come
take care of
from
this
a place of
garbage.
compassion.
They
Correct.
would,
Absolutely.
yeah. The
That
neighbors out
context
here,
changes the content, right? Context changes the content
it
again. Yeah.
totally does, yeah. And I mean, when we moved out here, we
That's a
were,
beautiful statement, by the way. That is a beautiful way to say that. Thank you for
and
sharing
it is, and it's true. It's what we found here. Like we had ordered something to be delivered, and they sent us the wrong stand for it. And also, they were sending us the wrong one. When they came to install it, they said, this would be really better horizontal instead of vertical. It would be more stable, but we don't have the stand for it. And right next to it was a pile of wood, and they said, hey, do you have a couple of tools we could use? We'll build you the stand. They didn't charge us anything for it. They built us a stand out of our wood. Can you imagine some contractor or delivery person in the city doing that? No.
No, they blame the shipping guy for sending the wrong thing or something. They'd find somebody to blame. They'd shift the blame.
But no, they
Telling
did.
You to call the customer service recorded hotline.
They would have, yeah. And guess what? They didn't ask us what our politics were. They didn't ask us any of that.
They did because they felt it was right. They did what they felt was right.
Exactly. And so I think, I love it out here. It's a huge adjustment, but there are days when I hate it.
That's why it's called a passion, by the way.
Yeah.
What you're willing to struggle through to get to tomorrow, because it's not just about what you like. It's literally struggle. Passion is about struggle.
And, I think one other thing I will say is that we have gotten so used to comfort, like that, to motivate us. We want what is comfortable, what is easy. We don't we want all of our appliances to be smart, so we don't have to remember we need milk. It'll tell us we're out of milk.
Path of least resistance, right?
The dryer is done. It'll send me a notification on my phone. All of these things for our comfort. And, there isn't a lot of growth and there isn't a lot of passion in comfort. It's just comfortable. And so, coming out here, and I want to be very honest about it, it's been a struggle for me to keep the passion and to keep that, and to, not get overwhelmed by the fact that I could wake up and work till I go to bed and not check a single item off my list of things that need to be done because I am doing everything that just needs to be done all the time. And that is overwhelming sometimes. And it's a very big adjustment for someone who was a member of the quote unquote elite, in a city where everything got done for me, to then, admit I was wrong about everything and then come out here and work. To do hard physical work that I haven't done for a very long time before I came out here. So.
Well, you weren't wrong about everything, because you were right about taking a look. So
before I did that,
a little credit, right? Well, no, I know, but we all learn, right?
We do, and I tend to be quite hard on myself, Mark. That is sort of.
No, we should be. That's what drives us to be better, right? Really, to be honest, that's what drives generally, people who excel or people who strive, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, and I think that maybe that is part of why I also was kind of ready to be done with what I was doing. It was very formulaic almost. I knew every meeting, if they're on this side of the aisle, this is what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to walk away no better off than I went, but I have to go to these meetings. Or this side of the aisle, I'm already on the same page with them and we'll strategize, or I'll give them facts or what have you. But I never thought I could accomplish anything. So why strive? Why work harder if you know the outcome before you get into it? And it's all,
I totally get it.
Politics and money. Follow the money again.
Yeah, and that's why we're talking about the policies over the politics, right? It's look, why can't we take this one good idea, like we mentioned? Andrew Yang has one good idea. Robert Kennedy has one good idea. Trump has one good idea. Biden has an idea, but he forgot it. It's okay. Maybe Kamala's got one. I mean, she has a hearty laugh. I will give her that. It is hearty. It's from the diaphragm. It's really, really haughty. It's good.
Well, if we can hear the idea in between the laughs, maybe we can figure out what her good idea is.
The wheels on the bus go round and round.
Well, they do, but yesterday's tomorrow is today's yesterday.
So could we transition if you do have time
Oh,
to
sure.
share your experience with the Libertarian Convention? Because we'll talk offline, but I'd love to hear your side because I had a horse in the race and I watched it live online. I was not there. So please share me your
So,
experiences with
well, I will
what happened or your
I decided to go to the Libertarian Convention because I would say, as a classical liberal, I don't know that I'll ever join another political party unless we all decide to form one that's different. That doesn't exist.
it's like, you know what, we're finding ourselves to be a tribe of the tribalists, and that's like an impossibility. It's like the libertarians literally argue about being more libertarian than the other person. So there's no cohesion because of that almost devout independence, but we can come together as that concept to say we will fight together for that so we can quibble amongst each other in a way.
Yeah. So
But anyway,
I thought I might find people of like minds and people who might be really interested to hear what I had to say at the Libertarian Convention. It just so happened that my book was published on May 25th, which was the Saturday of the Libertarian Convention. So I thought this is a perfect, sort of self book launch that I'll do.
launching pad in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I went and I had a table, out. Uh, so I didn't actually go into much of the meeting. So I just want to preface with that.
Yeah.
Uh,
No worries. Like I said, just any takeaway, like I said, your experience is more
um,
than, welcome.
so I had great conversations. Libertarian candidates that were there were extremely open to hearing from me about how I thought they might be able to reach some of the more left-leaning members of their districts or states, depending on what they were running for. And I had some great conversations. And I had one candidate tell me, you know what, I need to rethink my campaign. I think you may have just helped me get a lot of votes. So just in terms of how he was trying to approach, he was in a pretty left-leaning district, so I think he may, I wished him the best of luck because I don't know how many he could persuade at that stage of the game, but it definitely was great conversations. And I think, what I saw right away in talking to people and just sort of how it was, I definitely saw sort of the fractures in the Libertarian Party, sort of the different camps,
It's like
and
literally 51-49. It is
yeah.
so like razor thin. And I thought the tipping point happened this year. And we'll talk about that, but please continue. But it's like, to
Um,
your point, it is right there.
yeah, and I think that there were some like one divide that I saw that I think is pretty challenging in terms of how you message in today's situation is the distinction between those who believe that we shouldn't have any national borders and those who
We got two
open
big ones,
borders.
open border one.
Yeah,
And then obviously with the current libertarian presidential nominee,
yeah,
his children, the thing with children.
yeah. And so,
For lack of a better term, I don't know what else to say about it.
well, yeah, I think that second one, so I don't know. I will tell you that uh, the current nominees table in the exhibit or the area was right across from mine. And so I was kind of watching that whole thing. And based on how everything was going throughout, I was shocked when I saw what the final vote was because I left before the final vote. It did not look at all through the weekend like it was going to go the way that it did.
Eh.
So I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't in the room a lot. I did go in and watch Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s speech and Trump's speech while I was there. But
So
other than that,
you watch Robert F. Kennedy there, and you watch him at Freedom Fest. Before we continue there, could you share a little bit about that experience, those two speeches, your experience with him, and the Trump speech? Share a little bit about those.
Yeah, so very different speeches from RFK Jr. Like his speeches were both really good, I thought. But
He's good when he doesn't have any counters. I'm not gonna lie. He
Yeah,
speaks well.
he speaks really well. He was really basically what he did at the Libertarian Convention was start from, a place about freedom and liberty and our rights, and then proceeded to tell how both Biden and Trump, and especially Trump as it related to COVID, did not protect our rights, and how he would. And I think it was pretty well received speech. And I think there were quite a few. So Kennedy had a table there also, and he had a lot of supporters, I think, in the audience. That
Yeah, there was a good contingent of libertarians, because there's a good contingent of libertarians that are ex-liberals or whatever that's called. It's a little more rare on there are conservative libertarians as well, but they're not really Republicans. But you have lost a lot of the trad, we call it trad Democrat. To your point, that classical Democrat, that's a little more libertarian.
Yeah, I would say that's really true.
Sure.
So, he got a pretty warm reception, and he talked about, he hit some topics, and I'm trying to remember exactly what they were, that were designed to definitely, show he was going to have some of the libertarian priorities, protected in his.
Yeah, definitely talked about the state and the transparency and things like that.
Yeah.
Certainly at Freedom Fest, I remember.
So that was like sort of a difference, I would say, with Freedom Fest. He definitely was not talking about a unity government in the same way at the Libertarian National Convention that he did at Freedom Fest.
Oh, see, I took away his. See, this is where I took away from the Freedom Fest one was it's like, this is the problem with the government part is, yes, he wants to use government to attack the bad part of government. Okay, sure, fine. Under your watch, you're going to do it good. Okay, sure. But you're only got at most 8 years, if that. And if you don't got 8 years, you might get 4, if that. And when the next person's going to take those same powers and wield it in their good way, but that good way is not our good way. And the best answer is to remove the powers as much as possible, not make greater powers to attack the current ones in existence. And I think people never make that thing, because Kennedy sounds like a great person. He sounds like a nice, compassionate man. And I don't disagree when he looks you in the eye and he tells you he cares. Absolutely. The style of government is not the issue. It's the size of the government that's the issue.
And the power of the government. I mean, that
with
really
the size comes that power, right? The administrative, you have to untangle that, right?
You totally do. And, I think it kind of like, I worry about AI. I do. I worry, and not really. I don't worry about much, but I have concerns about.
Once again, a tool that's going to be misused for sure.
Or is it going to eventually decide that it's more important than we are, and it isn't going to really, I mean, I guess I've watched a lot of sci-fi way back to, I don't know.
Lisa, I would draw the conclusion that we are the problems that we try to solve in the world.
Yeah,
I'm not kidding. It won't take long for at least that one of those conclusions to come out. That's not, I mean, when you look at just pollution, not, climate, all that, just general pollution, like lead gasoline, just what we did with leaded gasoline until that was taken out of the equation. We still use 110 low lead for aircraft, and it's got like 5 times more lead than our 87 octane had. It's like, what? It's low lead and still, like, once again, I don't want to get off track. I'm just saying that's an honest, conversation to have.
100%.
AI looks at that and goes, "That's not good." The plastic island, not a good thing, right? For example.
No, and you're right. So, but like every movie and book that has ever been written about this tells us the same story, and it doesn't end well for humanity. Whether you want to look at war games way back from the 80s or The Matrix.
Would you like to play a game?
Yeah, would you like to play a game?
I love it.
All the way back there. All the way, to Terminator, all of them.
Terminator. I mean, what, Saturn V? Saturn V in the 70s. I mean, was an
Yeah.
AI robot, I think, that went rogue or something.
Oh yeah, in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Westworld.
Yeah.
Westworld, yeah, 2001. I mean, that was 69. Yeah, that would probably be it.
It's all. So we've been told this story is, so when he talked about like, I mean, I guess having government try to control AI would be better than not having anybody trying to control AI. But maybe we need to step back and ask a question. Just because we can, does that mean we should? And just because someone can, and that goes against sort of liberty ideas. And so,
And it goes against that science thing, because science doesn't really include ethics. Science is, the atom bomb. We didn't consider what we did. We considered if we could. We didn't consider what we're going to do with it. We're just like, can we figure it out? I mean, it was all about the quest for knowledge, right? And information.
And so while I support that, I also think we need to be somewhat cautious about that.
Absolutely. That's the rub, right? That's the balance that we have to dance in that way. And the reality, this is reality. This isn't utopian, one way and Capistan, right?
Exactly. No, and we are not, I think at this moment being as cautious as we need to be about AI. I think so. So that was interesting about his speech at Freedom Fest. So we'll say that, Trump did not get a warm reception at the Libertarian National Convention. It was very, very antagonistic in the room.
I watched it, yeah.
Yeah, and, I mean, I understand to some extent, but I also think that, I will say this, because I agree with you 100%. There are a lot of things I agree with Kennedy about. And if he didn't believe government can still be the answer, and if he didn't believe that climate deniers should be locked up at some point in his past, I could see myself supporting him, but those are kind of some threshold issues for me.
And Israel, I have to raise my hand about Israel personally for me.
Yeah, I can see you there too.
I mean, he's so well and eloquent. He can go back 100, 200 years on Ukraine, Russia. He can speak so well because he's on the other side of that. He can speak so well on that as a lawyer and dissect the conflict from decades and centuries conflict. Yet he can't do that for Gaza, Israel. He just says Palestine, pampered, got it. We gotta. It's like, whoa, where it's a dissonance to me. Like, to me, I don't see those are two completely separate individuals running for the same office, in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand.
And I hate to say that. I just had to question it. I just have to question it, I guess, for me.
And that's fair. I mean, another button on my table was question everything. And if it doesn't make sense, ask why, and figure it out. And maybe there's a reason. And maybe he has a reason that if you could sit down with him for 2 hours, he could explain it to you, Mark. I don't know. But
I've given him that opportunity. I've watched many, not once again, this is one, but however, I'm also policy driven, right? His COVID stuff, dead on. His vaccine stuff, dead on. His EPA stuff is definitely in the right direction. Certainly in some kind of way. There has to be something at least done with pollution. I would get, we're doing something, right? The climate agenda part, we got to back off of that. I'm not sure his 2A stance, because I'm still a little bit on that one, because we need that to protect our 1A. I mean, 2 protects 1. It is the last way for us to be able to speak freely, is to protect it, not to use it for tyranny, but to protect.
I 100% agree with you. I would say that there were 3 amendments that have kept us as free as we've been, and we can argue about what the extent of that actually is, but number 1, number 2, and number 4. And we effectively lost number 4 when the Patriot Act
just passed. Lost number. Right, 702, right? Section 702 is you don't even know warrants to spy on us, right?
Yeah, I mean, but Edward Snowden told us that they didn't before either. I mean, the Total Information Awareness Program was spying on us, and now, I mean, but I will also say that when 9/11 happened and the Transportation Security Act passed and the Transportation Security Administration was created, we get search without a warrant anytime we fly. That is the Fourth Amendment, and that
That right was
started.
just yanked away from us. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It started during the war on drugs. They started chipping away at it with exceptions to the warrant requirement for the war on drugs.
War on drugs. The one where our CIA was selling drugs in Compton to fund Nicaragua. Like, it's just all this weird. Like, once it all breaks apart, Lisa, my head, the cognitive dissonance. Once again, I'm a neocon. I had a T-shirt. Hey, Saddam, this scud's for you. Iraq broke me, absolutely broke me. WMDs and all that. Watching Colin Powell just lie in front of the UN and knowingly, and watching him like crumble as his consciousness ate himself, and he couldn't live with the fact that he did that, and 1.5 million people died. I mean, it's just, it's like unconscionable that my mother and father escaped Germany. They were born in 40 and 44. This is like, my mom escaped East Germany in 53. They came here in 55. So my mom lived under Hitler, was born under Hitler, lived under Stalin, and came here under Eisenhower. There are very few people who have this beautiful, amazing journey, and I'm so blessed to be here and to watch her defend what they are no longer defending, like the side that used to defend that, to be honest. And I think the conservatives, at least they held tradition a little bit more, in that way. Watching that crumble, it's just what's that, controlled opposition now. It's just slowing down the crumbling, and I'm trying to stay not black pilled here. It's gray, but I'm trying to find hope. And when I come across people like yourself, it just brings me inspiration. So thank you for sharing that time with me.
Oh, sure, yeah, and I do my best. I was black pilled for quite a while, but I do have hope. I think people are waking up. People are starting to push back. People are starting to reclaim their minds. They are starting to say, you know what? I am going to say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. You can do whatever you want to your body, but how dare you tell my child anything different? How dare you? And they're running for school board, and they're people, I think, have been pushed to a point where many people are waking up and taking a stand. And that's what motivated me to write the book, because I thought this is something I can do to help other people wake up, or help people wake up. And it's going to happen one person at a time, and I think it is. And I think I do my best to stay optimistic, and I do my best to disconnect from this technology every day and get outside and reconnect with nature and reconnect with my fellow human beings, to remember why it is our Constitution is important and our amendments are important, and remembering that freedom does not come free. We have to fight for it. Right now we're in an information war, and it's an information war for our souls. So we got to speak up. Everybody has to do the best they can to speak up, so that more people wake up and more people speak up. We the people have the power, Mark. We just have to take it back.
We do. We really do. And I really appreciate your time. And if you have, I'm enjoying the conversation. I've got all night. I've had 4-hour conversations. So we're 2 hours in. If you have anything you'd want to share about, or anything you'd like to talk about, we're here. The floor is certainly yours.
Okay. Well, I can share a little bit more. But you're gonna laugh,
please.
but I do have to go close the chicken coops at some points.
Okay. Well, let's call it a day here. We'll have another conversation for sure.
I mean, yeah, I think if you don't mind, I'll just give a shout out for the book, and then I would love to come and talk to you again, and we can kind of figure out, maybe we can chat ahead of time and have some topics, and we can do a deep dive into some of the things we already talked about. I'd love to talk about media bias, for example. I think that's something people could have some really good examples in my book. One, I think, the coverage of gun violence in this country. And
like 56 to 59% are suicide. And
yeah,
the percentage that are handgun violence, for example, versus the the AR-15 that we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah, and what the vast majority of homicides are, and who's committing them against whom, and what a lot of this comes down to, whether it be the trans, the gender ideology stuff, gun violence. We have a serious mental health crisis in this country. Nobody, I don't, like, with all due respect to all of my friends and colleagues in the psychiatric advocacy space, nobody who is sane walks into a room and shoots people they don't know. No, they're having a mental health issue, and that
And the
may very well.
SSRIs are starting to they're starting to correlate that, right, with the incorrect direction that we took that medication from another industry that pushed it through one study again.
Yeah,
Please
and
continue. Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. Quietly during COVID, the studies came out that depression is not related to serotonin. So these SSRIs do not do anything to correct depression.
Can you
And
share what an SSRI is a little bit, Lisa, just for the
it's
general audience? Because it's an
a
inhibitor, correct? It's a
serotonin
serotonin
reuptake inhibitor. So it prevents your
inhibitor. So
brain from uptaking serotonin. And serotonin was believed to be related to depression. So it prevented, but listed side effects are homicidal and suicidal ideation. And, we can't even have the conversation about whether or not a mass shooter, was on SSRIs. They don't allow it. And
I think it's like a 4 out of 5. If I'm happy to be fact checked, but I think the last 4 out of 5 or like 8 out of 10 or some really unique statistic seems to be very out of line with what you would traditionally think statistically probable.
And I will dare to say that if you also go back over the last at least 5 years, statistically high number of the mass shooters are also identify as trans. And so then you also
there
have
is a mental disorder of some sort, almost like like COVID had comorbidities. There's almost like a co-mentalities, like in a weird way. And I don't want to make any small joke of that. It is a serious problem. It's a serious problem.
And I raise it out of compassion for the victims of these shootings, but also for the perpetrators of these shootings. Not that, once you do that, I'm not going to defend you. Obviously, it is horrific.
Unfortunately, yeah, you can't. No.
And you can't defend it. But at the same time, between whatever they've been fed on social media, that is also a drug. Literally, it's a dopamine hit every time a new TikTok video comes on. So you're talking about dopamine, you're messing with serotonin, you're messing with the fundamental chemicals. But I feel for the people whose brains get destroyed by this, and then they undertake these horrific acts. I do feel for them, but obviously everything they've done is 100% immoral, wrong, and I can't defend them. But I have compassion for who they were before whatever happened.
And how they got there. We're really compassionate for how it happened, because it's not. I'm a pilot, so it's great. Yeah, a pilot crashes a plane. Okay, it's pilot error. Well, I guess it's solved because the pilot's dead now. No, what were the conditions that led up to the pilot making the decision or the action that caused that? It doesn't go away with the person going away. There's an underlying thing that led to that cultivation of that thing. So the compassion is a stoic compassion for, yes, this person is wrong for doing what they did, and they are held accountable. And we need to understand how that happened so that we can at least prevent it from a cultural perspective, so we don't get there again.
Exactly. And I think the same is true, with trans children who are detransitioning. Let's talk about why did that happen, and all of that. So I think that.
And once again, I hate to say follow the money. I mean, we talked about that all the time, but we're
Well,
finding industries where treatment, like war, it's all of the industries are about treatment. I mean, even wars, if you have enough people, you don't want to win a war. They don't want to win a war. They want to sustain the war, because the sustaining of the war is where the money keeps coming. Once again, follow the money. It happens
yeah,
in every industry, from education to pharma to MIC to big X, big Y, blank industry. It is,
anyone you want to look at. Yeah.
yeah. And that I can imagine that your time, what would have cultivated the traditional Democrat in you, the classical Democrat, is that compassion, noticing that part, because that's a
Oh,
truth,
yeah.
and
Yeah, and
going,
that is the
that's
truth.
not right. That's not right that these people are getting kind of a little rate, but it is a truth, but it's also a result of our allowance of it festering within the system. If we
100%. Yeah.
we never let it stay apart, and that's the late stage capitalism, when it buys itself, right? When it really, the regulations are bought to keep other people out, not to actually create some kind of safety, for example.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if you also add to it that, the number of times people have been driving cars into crowds, it's the same mental illness, it's a different weapon. So we don't
Yes.
talk about banning cars. The conversation always becomes about the guns. So we don't talk about what is going wrong in our society, that people believe that it's okay to either take a gun and mow people down or take a car and mow people down, and we just don't ever get to that conversation.
Well, we
So,
do actually, but we do it in a media twisty way. Let's delve into that real quick example you give. Remember, it was an SUV that killed all those people in that parade, but it was a white man that drove into the crowd in Carolina somewhere, right? Remember how the media spin it too, right? It's like, we can't be honest that it happened to be a person of color that drove that SUV into that parade. Or it
yeah,
was a person who was a trans ideology who had a manifesto in Tennessee who shot up that school, right? These are things we,
or it
once
was an
again,
illegal
it's a stoic
immigrant.
compassion to
Yeah,
solve the actual issues, to allow the civilization to heal, and move forward from something like that, and get beyond that.
but again, if your tools are fear and division, then that's what the media helps continue that division and create that fear. So, but I was digressing. I would love to come back and have another conversation with you sometime. But
Yeah.
I again,
Give us a shout out again, and I love the digression. So
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I talk about that too in the book. Part of what I do in the book is talk about media bias, and I use 4 examples, and those examples include gun violence. They include the situation in Ukraine. And I'm not a Putin apologist, but I don't believe people have been told the
I
facts.
think I am. I was told I was. You
Okay.
have no idea. I'm a puppet also. I'm a puppet
Okay.
of Putin.
So, I mean, I guess we might sort of be on the same page about what's happening over there, but the media has certainly not been honest and thorough in the facts about what led up to the situation over there. And then
Nope.
I talk about also sort of the summer of love versus January 6th, and how it was covered, and how the bias there. And I think there's one more example, but I think, the level of bias in the media is incredible. And I mean, we don't have
It
a
also
free.
became an elite job. It became an elite job. You remember those scruffy, wrinkled shirted guys from the 70s chain smoking, taking their Adderall, their glasses all crooked, and they got tape on them, holding them together. Their hair's a mess. It's now the elite, because you have to put an image. You have to look like Chris Cuomo all of a sudden. You can be a complete, absolute moron, an absolute idiot, and talk like that captured complete evil person. But he looked good. Gosh darn it, that guy looks so good on screen, doesn't he? And he can lift that weight, and gosh, he looks buff. So it's like became an elite institution from the blue collar, which is the classic Democrat. That was the journalist. It's to me, it's almost like it happened at Nixon. It's like once that got sensationalized, that broken story with Woodward and Bernstein, Deep Throat, and all that with Watergate, that shifted the government trust to the journalists. And then the corporation got the journalists captured and the government, and it's like all now
And
glomming together, you know?
Don't forget Operation Mockingbird, and don't forget our
Yes.
intelligence.
Thank you. Yes,
role
Mockingbird for sure.
Yeah. So, that is something, and that I think was really shocking and hard for me too, when I really realized that there were no independent journalists anymore. It's all corporate controlled. 6 companies
And
own all
Clinton
of
went
the
from like 51 to 6, I think, is what we did during that. He signed into that deal, right? I think we're now down to 6 total.
We're down to 6, Sinclair being one of them. And if you've ever seen the It's Extremely Dangerous to Our Democracy montage of local news, have you seen that, Mark?
Yes,
Sinclair,
I have seen that.
but that I think is pretty eye-opening to someone who thinks we have actual journalists who are reporting news independently of one another and of the government, because they're not.
I mean, we are having democracy. We've literally had 2 assassination attempts since Freedom Fest. Meanwhile, the guy with private security, Robert F. Kennedy, I didn't see a scratch. I met the guys who did his security. They were solid. They screened us before we got in there pretty darn well. But I find two attempts, right? One is obviously on Trump, and one was on Biden's presidential run. Clearly, 2 assassination attempts. And it's to think that democracy is at stake, while Zelensky on March 20th should have been removed from office if he wasn't reelected. But who cares? It wasn't an election because we were saving democracy. And the night that Anthony Blinken decided to save democracy by removing the ability to have elections in Ukraine, he plays Keep on Rocking in the Free World in Kyiv because he's a rock star. I mean, these are the unbelievable things that I see, and I apologize that I keep jumping in like that, but it's like we're watching these things and people don't know these things. And when I talk to people about these things, it's about the deprogramming, but we try to do it with kindness because I know we can't bash them over the head. We can't just smack because people get defensive. This isn't anyone's fault. People were into it because they're not being given the correct information. It does take work, but we have to trust each other that people are really trying to spread these weird pieces of information that, wait, you're telling me that Zelensky, who's fighting for democracy, is now a dictator? Yeah, he is. As of March 20th of 2024. Yeah, he is. That's just a fact. So,
that plus he got rid of all opposing parties.
And
Plus
killed his
he
people.
got rid of
Yeah. Let's talk about Michael McFaul complaining about Navalny dying in Russia as a Russian guy who was propped up by CIA in the first place or by the State Department. Let's talk about that guy while Gonzalo Lira, an American citizen, gets arrested in Ukraine by the people we are funding in the hundreds of billions of dollars to protect democracy. They let him die in their prison. Not a word is said about that. Not a single word is said about that. We rescue Brittany Griner, but not the other gentleman who has been sitting there in that prison for what? For the optics? You know,
yeah. I mean, I think 2 things I'll say about first, Mark, the best strategy for helping people wake up is to ask them questions. Don't try to tell them. Ask questions, because what you're trying to do is force the dissonance to get to the point where the brain stops. And
that's exactly what I do. It's a very come to me, like open-handed with the salt lick, right? When to the deer. Yep. It's like, come on, here.
Ask questions. You'll never be able to tell them anything. Yep. And the other thing that I would say is that the question, when you say, well, I'm defending democracy, or we need, democracy's at risk, the question is, what is democracy? What does it mean to you? Because if you're protecting an institution, that's not democracy. If you're protecting a particular policy, that's not democracy. If you're trying to keep a candidate who has won the primaries off of your ballot because of something, that's not democracy. If you are trying to, so what does democracy mean? Now, I personally I'm glad we don't have a direct democracy in this country.
No, I love that we have a constitutional republic. I was going to say the truth is, from the libertarian perspective, if people don't know, democracy is the tyranny of the majority. I mean, that's how democracy is viewed from a libertarian perspective.
Yeah, and but so that's really the question: is what is democracy? And it's even worse than a lot of people think. Well, let's say you have 1,000 people in your city, and you have a direct democracy. It isn't that you need 501 people to vote for something in order for it to be a tyranny of the majority. It means that if 200 people show up and vote, 101 of them could. If only 30 people show up and vote, 16 of them can have a tyranny of a majority. So,
right. There's a way to break that down for sure.
Yeah, and when the uniparty elite talk about democracy, what they really mean is them. That's what they mean. They mean the people who are in control. That's what's at risk. It's not our constitutional republic. It's them being able to win through cheating or what have you, but in general, but it's their own power that's at risk, not democracy. So, all right.
So before we go on that, you're in you have the booth. If I just may, just a quick about your experiences on the booth. Explain maybe just one like less than positive experience that maybe turned around, or how you approach those people, and maybe just your general positive experiences as people walk by and see
at the Libertarian Convention or at Freedom Fest or.
Yeah, at Freedom Fest or any of the conventions or anything, like when you have your booth open, I'm sure you get mixed responses, because I talked to a bunch of people.
Overwhelmingly positive, I would say. I mean, very few negative responses. I think the thing is, and you may have noticed this when you talk to me, Mark, I'm really genuine and vulnerable. Like, I'm pretty vulnerable about my story, and I'm pretty open about it. So, and I think people.
I think that opens for trust, because I'm the same way. It's like, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I have taken my hat. I put it in my hand. It is out of humility I come to you with an idea, because I came from a different idea and realized.
Yeah, I'm humbled by this whole experience. I mean, my complete ego was destroyed, and I've had to rebuild it. And it's a much humbler ego than, was pushed at me through all my indoctrination and all of my schooling and my jobs. And so I bring that humbleness with me. And, if I'm having a conversation, I mean, I had a couple where, there were a few things we didn't 100% agree about, but I think we agree to disagree, and we were respectful. And I come at it from, you're right, I'm wrong, it's okay, that's fine. That doesn't mean I think you're a bad person or I don't like you. It's just we have a difference of opinion. And so I don't really have any negative, to share. But I've had
that's great. I love it. I love that people come to you, and you do have that way. To your point is, the way I walk by your booth myriad times during that event, and it was just very nice just to see. They were pleasant conversations, regardless of the ideas that they were presented with. Some kind of tact, humility, respect, courtesy, whatever you want to say, that left it open for people to allow interaction to occur in the first place. And that's very important.
Yeah. And, I mean, I had long conversations with a lot of people, and, what really came through to me at both places was how much so many of these people cared about a family member or a friend that they really wanted to help, and I did my best, to help them. And it's funny because the whole idea of asking questions is really hard for some people because they want to tell them. They think they know and they want to tell them. And even when they would try to reframe something into a question, like I'd say, okay, so tell me, like, give me an example of a conversation you had with this person and how did it go? And I'm like, well, can you reframe that into a question? And they would, and it would still be them telling me something. But asking,
Right.
but
Because it's got that bias to it. Yeah. Because like I'll give you an example.
exactly.
I was at the fireside chat with the libertarian candidates, and there were two sticking points. We talked about them specifically, but I made sure to. Oh, I did my best to not let my bias get involved in the question. So, for example, the border, right? My understanding is Chase Oliver, for example, is a little more open border. That's my understanding at the time going in. But what I said was, could you please clarify your border policy or your stance, because I'm hearing many different ideas about it, so you have to your point, you have to be very careful at how those questions are framed as well. Like that one that went after Tucker, the one in Australia. She's like, oh, so so that now that you said white people are being replaced, he's like, I never said that. Like your whole framing, your whole framing of the questions already biased from a lie at the onset. And that's to your point about the media bias as well.
Yeah, oh, definitely. So Um, I really don't have, yeah, I mean, I will say that I've had some great reactions to the book. These were multi-day events, and I had one person say that they left and they were up till midnight reading it and they couldn't put it down. I had another guy come up and say, um, I really want to give you a hug. And I was like, okay, I love hugs. Love is
Well, they're great.
love there. Hugs are great. So, and I said, why do you want to give me a hug? He's like, because you've been so open and honest, and what you put down on paper is really hard to go through or to admit, let alone go through. So, like, I just want to like thank you with a hug, and so I got a hug. So, I've had really really warm reception, really good experiences. And I've said this to multiple people, like, um, I also went to CPAC in February, and I was very well received there as well. And so I would say from the libertarian and freedom community, independent thinkers, as well as conservatives, I've been welcomed. And I don't know that the same would happen if any of them went to the DNC. I
Yeah.
don't know that it would be as much of an open, welcome. And so I've been
I
really,
think that's a
really,
perfect place to end that.
yeah. And
I
so
don't think the
um,
DNC is welcoming, right? Go ahead. Go
no,
ahead.
I doubt it. But all I want to do is say again, the book is Deprogramming Democrats and Uneducating the Elites: How I Escaped the Progressive Cult. It's available on Amazon and it's available on Barnes and Noble. I am deprogrammed them on Twitter. And you can also check out my website, deprogrammingdemocrats.com. You can sign up. I'm going to start doing like a weekly deprogramming digest, and
Oh,
kind of
excellent.
out ideas. Also talking about current events and how it might be perceived in the progressive cult versus reality and those kind of things. So you can sign
And
up
just
for that at my
and
website as well.
a thought for you would be to do like a Twitter Spaces too, an X Spaces, because that would be
I
fun. Because
will.
then you could talk to a lot of people and have a lot of interactions. You just need a headset, real simple
Yeah,
setup.
yeah, I have a headset. I just didn't put it on
Yeah.
for so.
No, I'm
But
just saying, like, you could do stuff like that too. Like, there's a lot of ways now to spread messages of this liberty and just general deprogramming. It's not even like, yes, you came from the Democrat side. Hey, I came from the neocon side. So we
and
had to undo that stuff that they threw in our face, because we need to step back, look at both sides, look at all sides from analytical lenses, use reason, logic. Yes, compassion is part of that, but also, reason is part of that, and logic and reality. It's so many things.
and data and evidence and all of
Data,
those
yeah,
things.
absolutely. And tradition. Some not, it's asking a conservative person why they have to defend something like marriage or children. It's like, because we've like done it pretty much since we were standing upright. Like, how do you defend? How do you defend something that's just worked forever? You know what I mean? It's like there's no need. in that way. So it's
Yeah,
fun.
it is, but I think, I can give you some data and evidence to different families, and we could talk
Oh, no,
about
no.
that.
The point is, because it's existed this long, is the whole point is that it is this more stable, the net positive,
Oh yeah,
the net way
yeah.
to get to propagate, right? Like that's kind of the point, is that it's existed is already the evidence. There's no need to defend it because the existence that it's propagated this far, kind of, you
A
know what I
hun-
mean? It's like
yeah, no, I,
explains
I
itself.
got I got it. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. So
Well,
thank you so much for having me on, Mark.
thank you. I know you need to get your chickens, and that's so great you have that thing. Please, I would love for you should do a cooking show with all your fruits and vegetables and all your eggs and everything, and that would be
I
fun.
will.
So,
I love cooking, and I'm a great cook if I say so myself. But I
yes, I
will.
like it. Pioneer 2.0, we'll call you. How about that?
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
And we
So
should we
nice
should
to
have
meet
another
you.
conversation.
Yes. Do me a favor. This is what we'll do. Take down the topics. I can talk. You see what we can talk about. Deep, wide, you name it. We'll do
Okay.
it. Let me hit stop here really quickly. Thank you
Okay.
so much for joining us on Knock Conscious. Okay.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Ha- have a great day.
You too.
1, 2, 3, 4. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. I hate to leave you, but I really must say, good night, sweetheart.